Hello and welcome to our basic training. The topic of this video is business, and my name is Curtis Storr. I'm the trainer with Family Investor. Some of you are probably saying, why do I need to know about business? And I thought we were just going to learn how to build wealth. Well, let me ask you one question. If you can save 30% on every purchase you make, would you be interested in learning how? Most of you would say yes. I don't know anybody who would say no to 30% off everything they buy. It's like a sale on top of your sale. You get 50% off at the store, but you get an additional 30% just for buying things. Let me get into the training. Now you're interested, right? Okay. Excuse me. Next slide, please. Okay. There's a saying that goes, a penny saved is a penny earned. It's wrong. It's a nice saying. I love the saying. But we teach here that a penny saved is better than a penny earned by up to 40% or more. And you're saying, what? You just said 30%. I can save 30%. It depends on I get into it. I start going off in tangents, and I apologize for that. I'm got to try to keep this basic, but I have so much information about business and real estate that I will, my passion for you learning, though, I have to kind of hold back on some of that stuff. But so in the deep dive training, under inflation and taxes, and also in the business training in deep dive, we're going to prove to you this concept that a dollar earned is actually 75 cents or less in your pocket. We just use round numbers. These are not exact numbers. It depends on your tax bracket. I'll tell you that. That's the tidbit. It depends on what tax bracket you're in. In taxes, you'll learn it's anywhere from 25 to 39% in 2016. But we'll show you how a dollar saved is actually like earning $1.65. And I say up to because it could be more, it could be less. But you're still saving more than a dollar. It's a big difference here. It's almost a dollar difference. Think about that for a second. And it has to do with business deductions. Because business deductions, anything that you have to buy for your business, you get to deduct more than you do on a personal level. Unless you're doing a position, some of you may be in a position with your company where some of the things you do, like travel and stuff, you get those deductions. But in business deductions, like I said, travel, trips, dining, drinking, and like on a business trip, if you buy a soda or a beer, entertainment, vehicles, plumbers, they have a fleet, they call it, of vehicles. That's a business write-off. You get depreciation on that type of property also. I'm starting to go off in the advanced stuff, but I want you to know that that's why computers, laptops, iPhones, Samsung phones too, TVs are monitors. You can do business presentations on them. Even your paper and your pens. I mean, if you really get down to it, it's about everything you buy. Of course, it's for the business, okay? And remember, I'm holding back as much as I can because this is a basic training, and each level of trainings is built on the previous. So I'll get into the math stuff later, and we're going to get into wealth building soon. So let me keep moving on with this training. So, all right. All the reasons here are listed. They have an exclamation point behind them because I believe they're all exciting reasons. And I'll go through the list real quick and see if you get excited about any of them. Up to 30, we just talked about this, up to 39% deductions. That's the 2016 tax highest level. I mean, if you're you're making a high income, which if you're in a business, you should be, you're going to be at the top tax bracket. That's why they give you the deductions. So to try to get you back down in a lower tax bracket. Our trainings, you'll get closer to your children because it involves them. If you choose to, it's up to you. Asset protection. Keeping things separate is keeping them safe. You hear horror stories all the time out there about how people lose everything. And there's ways to protect yourself from losing everything. But they didn't do it. And I bet you there's no doubt in my mind that they wish they did. That's why you need to learn this stuff now and apply it. And it takes your level of education to real life experience. Some colleges are doing this now. We have a college here in Arizona that actually owns a hotel because they teach hospitality. So they have you work in a hotel. It's real life experience. Nothing teaches you like real life experience. That's my teacher. I have been through, they call it the school of hard knocks, because I didn't go to a school like the one here, the college here in Arizona that teaches you by real life experience. A lot of them give you hands-on experience. You know, in a lab, add this to this and this and this and this is what happens. That's not real life. In real life, if you're working in a lab, you're adding things together that you don't know what the end result's going to be. And, and that's real life experience in a business. You have no idea the outcome. Better planning, better recipes, and you won't blow up the lab. Anyways, I get off on those tangents, but I hope the things that I do talk about stick. It's, once again, our basic level is like planting seeds. And a business, if you have a business and it's a personal business, you have access to the most flexible retirement plan available on earth. Some people say, God, I wish I could put more away in tax deferred accounts and this and that. Well, in our trainings, we show you which ones are good, which ones aren't as good. I don't like to say they're bad, but they're not as good as others because you got to weigh the pros and cons on these things. But there's a retirement plan that I use that is so flexible. It's amazing. You won't even believe it when you first hear about it, because you can do everything that they say you can't do with your 401k. But we'll get to that. Planting seeds, keep that in mind. And you create passive income with the business. You can get your business. My buddy is breaking through that level as we speak. He has employees working for him, and once he gets everything working correctly, he could sit back and manage his managers and create passive income. That's what I do in real estate. I manage the managers, and I do numbers. And you could create a sellable asset. You have heard it a lot lately. It's just mind-blowing how many people out there build a widget online or an app or whatever it is, and Google buys it. for millions of dollars, 43 millions for some, and sometimes they don't even use it. They just buy it so they have the rights to the technology and they could use it later or incorporate it into what they have already. And you create real job security. You're not going to fire yourself in a business. And, you know, a lot of these things I'm talking about cover, you know, a for-profit business. And I'll get into that on the next slide a little bit. But, and personal fulfillment, it feels good. Because if you're working for the man, as people say, or a company, or anybody else, if you're working for someone else, you have some personal fulfillment, and good leadership and good managers will pat you on the back and give you credit for what you do, but it belongs to them in the long run. It's even in your contract of employment a lot of the times that what you produce while working for company A belongs to company A. It doesn't belong to you any longer. And if you have a business, everything you create belongs to you. You own it. They call that intellectual property, by the way. And you get to do it your way. Have you ever gone to a restaurant or any business and saying, I could do this better? Or even the company you're working for now, you're like, you know, working in a shop or anything. You get really good at stuff and you're like, God, if I had a company like this, I would run it this way and it would be better. I could make it better. So you could do it your way. That's the great thing about a business. And you have the personal fulfillment that goes with it when you succeed in making a better company than the one you're in now or the one you see. And you create a legacy that can live forever and it could be for your family. There's companies around that have been around for hundreds of years. And some shorter, but like Walmart. Look, I think that family's pretty happy that their grandpa did what he did. And it's what the wealthy do. And if you want to be something in life, you have to do what they do. If you want to become the fastest runner in the world, you got to do what the fastest runner does. If you want to play football at the level of Jerry Rice, and I know some of you don't follow football, but Jerry Rice was a receiver for the 49ers, and he holds to this date, and this is 20 some years ago that he played, some of the records. But if you listen to some of his talks, he'll tell you that he put in 150% into being the best receiver there was. And so anything like, and it's like McDonald's too. Ray Kroc, he created a franchise that you can buy for a couple $1 million and go to their university to learn how to be another McDonald's owner. And they all succeed. It's proven. And so that's the thing, that if you want to be wealthy, do what the wealthy do. And they own businesses and foundations. And I get off track a little bit, but I want you to understand why you want to start a business. And to be fair, I also like to cover why you wouldn't want to start a business. Okay, this is a tough one for some. And later we do an exercise that you ask yourself if you're serious about starting a business. And remember, you need to learn about business in these trainings because it's part of the strategies we teach you to maximize your protection and maximize your wealth. And it isn't as difficult as if you were to start a full-blown for-profit business where your source of income comes from customers and not just by restructuring where your money flows. That's our strategies. We show you how to change the flow of your money using a business model. For example, our strategies are like Southwest Airlines. It's about 13% employee owned, and it's known as an ESOP, which it's an employee stock ownership plan. So the Southwest employees own 13% of the company, which is the same or very similar to our advanced trainings, and that they have this unique culture where the employees all will go the extra mile because they have pride of ownership. Same thing with our family investor strategies. You'll be proud, and so will everybody working with you in these strategies if you have people working with you in these strategies. Our strategies are not, you're not required to have your family work with you, but we show you how it's beneficial. And keep in mind, most of these reasons are for a full for-profit business with public as your customers, okay? So let me get into that. Why not a business? Because it's a lot of work. I mean, you got to go and open up the store. If one of your employees don't show up to work, you have to stay there. You know, and just starting it up. And I'll cover that a little bit in the basics here so you have an idea. And you may fail, you know, and it could be just because your why, remember we went over that training, doesn't give you the level of passion you need and the faith to work through the hard times, the setbacks. That's everybody is the same, where sometimes you just feel like throwing in the towel, quitting. And there's lots of competition out there. So yes, if you can, like I said earlier, if you can do it better, that makes you unique. If you have a better way of doing something, or you know, making a higher quality product, or even making the same quality product at a lower cost. Anybody know Kia? You could buy stuff there pretty inexpensively, but it's not the highest quality, but they've filled a niche. They're unique. You may also fail because raising funds to succeed can be difficult. You need to have money to start a full-blown for-profit business. But we'll show you how to make money, so if you decide to do it later, you'll have plenty of cash. And finding the team or the people required to help you succeed, because you might lack organizational skills. I belong to a large group of people, of entrepreneurs, and most, I would say 95% of them are CEO types. A CEO type, let me define that, is someone who has the vision, the passion. They want to change this business, but they don't know how to get started. They don't know what paperwork needs to be done. We cover that. Doesn't mean you have to do it. You could hire other people to do this stuff. You could have someone else do it for you. Just a tidbit. I get hired on as a operations because I'm the operations kind of guy. I'm a solutions-based person. I'm good with numbers. I can work with the technology people. I can work with the finance people. I can find solutions online, software solutions for the company. I can help people. I don't write the vision. I don't do the mission statement. I don't do the business plan, but I'll do the finance plan. You know, how much can this company really make? I can do the numbers. So you may not be able to. So we can be a team. Not literally, but I'm saying that's one of the first things you have to do. And when you're in business, You can't make your employees or your customers your friends. It's a difficult thing to do. I've been a private lender and one of the top in there, and my partner is a really friendly guy, which is great, but he became too close to the borrowers. He became their friends. And long story short, when you get too close to someone, it's harder to make a decision. Try foreclosing on a property that's owned by a friend. There you go. So if you become friends with a person and you have a lien or a loan on their property and you have to foreclose, it's going to become one, even though it's the first thing you should do as a lender, as a bank, it's the last thing you want to do. I get it. That's why you can't cross that line. And with employees, you can create all kinds of problems. You've heard it on TV. Oh yeah, she used to work with me, and now they're filing a sexual harassment suit. It's all over the news. You know, and it's from, some of them's from 15 years ago. It's just a line you have to draw. And if you're a friendly person, it's going to be tough, but you got to do it. And your success may take longer than planned. Ouch. I was supposed to launch this training. At this point, we just went into July. I was supposed to launch this training a year ago. Then I realized that I needed to be unique and fill the gap of what everybody else was missing. And so that turned it into a 3 to 6 month project into a year to a year and a half project. But I want to do it right for you. That's why you have as many trainings as you do, and that's why it's so many different levels. So this project of mine has taken longer than I planned. It's okay though. And let's get back to the business basics. Back to the basics. And I hope you don't feel like I'm lecturing you. It's not a lecture. It's life experience. It's what I've been through. I've been through the pain, and you know, I do these trainings to help you not go through the pain that I did or have, or other people. We have to learn from other people's mistakes, or we're going to do them. There's no way of avoiding that. So anyways, back to the business basics. Okay. And I'm going to try to keep it real basic here, so you can be prepared to implement our strategies later. And once again, I'll take you through the different levels here. Okay. Think of business, which is just a company. Think of it as an entity. I want you to start learning that word, entity, that provides a service. Entity is just an existence, right? You can look up the definition. So it's something that provides a service, right? That's easy. Okay. Now for the different entity types, you have federally incorporated, which is federal level stuff. So they usually are required to have in their name national or federal. Which include like banks, things like that. That's why they could be federally insured. But state incorporated, you have the option of being a sole proprietor, which is a single owner, which I will tell you up front now, avoid this type, or partnership, where you're jointly liable. You have to avoid this, and we show you why later on. We get into the whys later. Right now, you just got to understand that these are the type of entities that are available. There's professional limited liability corporation. That's when you're licensed. So it'll include attorneys, CPAs. You could have a real estate firm, and it would be a professional limited liability corporation. Then there's the limited liability corporations, which the two. You could put professional limited liability corporation under here, but I like to keep it separate because that's a licensed one. We're not going to get into that type. The limited liability corporation, the reason we use it is it's limited. It limits your liability. It doesn't protect you 100%, but it limits your liability. So if you make mistakes, you may not be liable. And it's a vehicle to protect your assets. And this protection is different for every state. And you have to select a taxation structure, which is important. And let me get into that. And we get into it deeper in the deep dive, okay? This is just basic stuff, planting the seeds. Okay, now the word entity, right? So entities, I want you to think of an entity as another person. This person has a birth date, right? And basically the date of incorporation. You send in your paperwork. They acknowledge that you have set up this LLC, and that date of incorporation becomes your company's birth date. The parents, right? Your parents or parent, they're the same as the directors in the company. And you've heard of board of directors, right? And board of directors can also be the members. So you could be any and all roles in your company. That's why when you first start up a company, you are everything. And then later on, as it grows, you hand off those tasks. Like I said earlier, that's what I do. I build companies, and I resign as operation officer and I actually find my own replacement. That's what I used to do. So don't call me up and say, hey, no. A little joking doesn't hurt. And those members are, basically a word for owners. And they're shown in the articles of organization. And we even help you fill out your articles of organization, how you should do it. And, states and everything. We get into all that. And entities, you can define them in what's called the operating agreement. You could say, cover when and how it dies, so to say. Even better than a person. No. That's the difference in a person. You can set a date. You could set up an entity that only lasts for 1 year. And you can file your articles that way and say, yeah, we're just going to have this set up for 1 year and get rid of it. Most people don't do that because sometimes you don't know how long it's going to take. Sometimes they go from point A to point Z. Or you could, under a certain circumstance, it dies. Like you lose a partner. It's a possibility that, it goes away, especially if they're a major partner. And then also in the operating agreement, you map out the rules it's going to live by, this entity. How is it going to live? Like, is it going to live as a real estate investment company? Is it going to live as a capital management company? Is it going to live as my I don't know, widget company, factory company. You define what this company's going to be. It's like you ask a child, what are you going to be when you grow up, right? And the purpose, you set that up front in your operating agreement. And in that operating agreement, you also define what the parents are going to do, what the roles of your members are, what the roles are for different people working in the company, on the company. Like your leaders, the leads. I was going to put parents or husband and wife, but it's whoever the lead is. They're considered a president or CEO. CEO is Chief Executive Officer. You've heard it before, but I'm defining it. And your co-leaders will be your vice president, or could be like myself, Chief Operating Officer. You could actually have a Chief Technology Officer, Chief Marketing Officer. These are like all work under the CEO. The CEO is the big boss, the lead, and these are also leaders that are working underneath in specific areas. It's funny, I get into discussions that the operations officer actually runs the company. So keep that in mind. As a CEO, you don't have to be the one that run the company. Banking, who does the banking at home? That's your treasurer or CFO, Chief Financial Officer. And then your file organizer, who keeps the files at home? Who knows where the bills are and where the old things and the taxes that were filed? Who organizes all that is the secretary of your company. And a little tidbit, the secretary is a very powerful position in a corporation. Their signature goes on resolutions. I'll get into that. But anyways, their signature, they have a lot of power because of their role. And also, in the operating agreement, you could designate, who has the most influence. Like in your household, oh, go ask your mom or go ask your dad, right? Who has the most influence? And it's designated in a corporation by votes, and votes are determined in your operating agreement with the voting power that person has. Okay? And other entities will include estates and trusts. Those are not limited liability entities. And there's 24 other types or categories of entities, like nonprofits, churches, the list goes on. And if you get into one of those entities, which we won't at this point, we'll talk about them later, but you don't need to worry about those unless you want to start up a nonprofit. And we get that. That's advanced training. I think that's level 4 training. Shareholders. People, my friend got really uncomfortable with this because when you hear the word shareholder, you think about large corporations, and then all of a sudden you got this big weight on your shoulders, shareholders. But it's not a big deal. The people who have shareholders are just people who have ownership interest, units, stock in a company by either investing money or work. So sweat equity and capital, it's called. And I got to just cover this real about those words: interest, units, and stock. They're all basically the same thing. It's a percentage of ownership. And I think attorneys do this stuff on purpose. They call them different names. They do that. They also call your operating agreement bylaws in some states. They're almost identical, but they use these different names, and they say there's a difference, but they're really, for basic training here, think of them as the same thing. What percentage of ownership? That's just something you issue to the person, to the shareholder. And shareholders are members or not members. It could be one person, which is sole proprietorship. It could be two people, which could be a partnership or an LLC. It can be a group of people, which can be an LLC, which is taxed as an S or C corporation. So those are different types. Public investors, if you're building a company that you're going to go out and get public investors, on the stock market, you have to have a C corp. That's just one of the rules. And you take your company to the next level by selling stocks to make it grow, like most huge corporations are. It's a way of raising money. Members are not. I define that. Shareholders can be at different levels, which they could be owners or just shareholders. You could be the original owner or just own a portion of the company. Original owners are usually called the founders. But shareholders are always members. So because they have interest in the company, okay? I know it's confusing, but think of them as you have founders and then members. And public investors, though, stockholders, they normally do not have any say in how the company's ran, except for where they invest their money. I hope you got that. The only say a public stock holding person has in a company is by if they put money in the company, that means they like what they're doing, or if they pull their money out. And you could be various degrees of both. You could in the operating agreement, once again, you could determine the voting rights. So you could have someone who puts money into your company because they want a share of that company, you could do this privately for a smaller company without going public. You could have someone put money in your company, give them a share, but you don't want them running your company. So you don't give them the voting rights. But then again, also, since they don't have voting rights, they're usually not responsible for additional capital too. Okay, just keep that in mind. And now I'm going to go into what I call tidbits, other things you need. We never recommend using the entity types of sole proprietor and partnership, or using the words member or owner as your title in any documents. And this is for protection reasons. So some of you are smart enough to ask, how do we file our articles of organization to set up our company if we don't provide that or use that information and put our names on as members? And we cover that in the deep dive training. Entities are very flexible. Like people, they're similar in structure, arms, legs, head, core, body. You know, entities are similar to that, but each entity, like each person, you have your own personality. And that personality is determined by how do you want to run the company, aka also known as your operating agreement, also known as your bylaws in some states. Also, if you start a business, always remember it's easy once you understand the rules. And the one rule to always remember is you can always change everything later, which is called a resolution. Okay, so no freaking out. Don't get overwhelmed when we get into the deep training. I'll remind you then also. I hate paperwork, but it's always going to be what saves you from the IRS, attorneys, lawsuits, and issues that arise with your partners and the public. You know, because something happens, you can be protected to a degree, limited liability, but you have to state certain things in your operating agreement. And so that's paperwork. You know, like so many other things you have or will learn in life, if it's not in writing, it's hard to prove what your intentions were or will be. And if not, it's left up to a third party to decide your fate. No, most of the time a judge. Could be a jury. Is he lying? Is he credible? You hear it all the time on those TV shows. Is this a credible witness? Is this a credible person? Oh, you shouldn't testify on your behalf because, you know, maybe the guy's come off the wrong way or answer the questions and look bad. You know. Anyways, paperwork. Your articles of organization is one of the first pieces of paper that you fill out, that you file with the Secretary of State, most states, showing your intent to start your business, your company. And normally that's filed with an application. They have a short questionnaire, things that they want to know when you're filing the articles of organization. Also, your operating agreement, which is your OA, sometimes you'll see that in writing. And once again, how you plan to use and run this company. And you could, like I said, you could change and define it further later on using minutes and resolutions. Resolutions will be every little change or step. Like when you first start your company, Curtis is the president, treasurer, secretary. I'm doing it all. But later on, as the company gets bigger, I don't want to take care of the books, so I designate a treasurer. And I don't want to keep all the paperwork, so I designate a secretary. I'm still the president. Usually once you're the president or CEO, you stay that way until you replace yourself. Or COO, like I replaced myself. It's part of the plan. But you have to document that. And it's good for you too. It's like when I stop being the operations officer, I want that documented. And so everybody knows that my responsibility ended on X date. Okay? Or if you go in a real estate one, you would do a resolution to buy a property, showing that you had intent to do that and get a loan from whoever. You know, these are you just document these things. So it's not left to question later on. Same with contracts and agreements. When you sign up for a job, you sign an agreement. And one of the biggest things we teach you about those agreements is, number one, read them, because there's no compete clauses. My friends are currently moving from one state to another because the husband has this great talent in home repair and stuff, but the company he's working for currently has a no compete clause, so he cannot work in that state any longer if he leaves that company with all what he does. I don't know if it's the whole state, but maybe 15 miles, but that covers most of the city. You know, and there's, it's in court now here in, for some companies, that they had to revise that, because it's like that would be the end of your career. If you're a handyman, or if you provide a service that you're licensed for, and you know, like the latest one I've heard about is estheticians working in the beauty industry. They go work for a certain company, but if they decide they can't work for that company anymore and they quit, they can't work for another company. That's wrong. So they're fighting that right now here. I think it's here in Arizona, but probably it'll affect that clause nationally, because you know, and we know it's wrong, but and anyways, my friends don't mind moving to a new state. They were thinking about it. Now this is giving them the extra boost to do it. Share certificates. You got to keep track of who owns your company, and there's a ledger in there that tracks transactions. It's like a ledger for your checkbook. It tells you where those percentages are going and how many you have, how much you have left over. Because some companies, if you plan on going really big, you have more shares than you issue to everybody, because you have to leave shares over later for people like, I'll say myself, if I become an operations officer, I'm going to want some shares. You're going to have to give me some of those shares. So if you hand them all out, you won't have any left over, but you could always get more later. But this is a way to track it. It's like checks, writing checks in a checkbook. It's that simple. But you really got to keep track of it. And all this stuff should be contained in what's called a corporate book. You could go online and order them, or whoever sets up your entity, you can get one from them, and they'll make it even nicer for you. And you know, and I mention this to people, but they don't hear that part. They just hear that it's going to cost them $300 or so to get a corporate book that's set up for them, and you even have a corporate stamp. And I go into that in the advanced tradings. And then if you ever end up in court or anything, your attorney's going to say, well, I'd like to look at your corporate books, which will include not just your corporate book with all the paperwork in it, but in your finances. Anyways, that's why you need to learn this stuff. Okay. The deep dive training, so you know, some of the things we're going to cover in that is before you start a business. You're going to have all these things you have to do before you even start a business. You know, you got to know what is required to start and run the business right. You got to really evaluate, and we go through this exercise, if you're serious or if it's just going to be a hobby. If you get into a business and you build a business, and the IRS later on comes along and says, no, you never really did have a business, it was just a hobby, boy, you could be in a mess. You can end up owing a lot of taxes. You need to identify your weaknesses to be successful. Like I said earlier, not everybody's a COO, operations person. Not everybody is a visionary. Not everybody is the worker that you might need. Not everybody knows technology. Not everybody knows how to do balance the books, right? And then you have to also know what you're going to need. You have to do a financial plan because you need to know how much capital you need. What equipment am I going to need? If I'm one of those estheticians and I'm going to start up my own business, what are the costs going to be, and how much am I going to charge for my services to pay for these things? Because if you don't make enough money to pay for these things, you have to raise more capital to pay your bills, or if you can't pay your bills, then what happens? They repossess that stuff. They take it back. They come after you for the money. They file, claims against you in court and your business. Okay. When you start a business, we'll talk about that and how to apply. We walk through all that. The paperwork required to make it a legitimate entity and not a hobby. And after you start a business, what you're required to maintain that it's a legitimate business. We try to keep things simple, so we train and relate it to what you are already doing every day. I think we demonstrated that in this training. And some of you lucky enough to be doing the work that you need with your current employer. So, it's not going to be any different. Your employer, here's a little tidbit I want to talk about current employers. If your current employer has been in the business for, let's say, maybe about 15 years or more, they're most likely not running their business correctly. So don't take what they're doing as the way it's supposed to be done. Educate yourself, which you're doing here, but continue to educate yourself with our deep dive stuff. We send you to links where you can educate yourself outside of this training, because each state is different. Your requirements in each state is different. Okay, and we go over that. But you may be in a state that we don't cover, so we tell you what to do. And you have to do your due diligence. And the reason I say people with older business, 10 or 15 years older, may not be doing it right because they don't have the resources or the support that we have nowadays. They may have, it used to be the Rotary Club and stuff and things like that. You have your local clubs, but now we have Google, the internet, where you could get a lot of your information there and answer any of your questions. Plus, you have local small business associations that you can go to get the training before you start your business. There's a bit to know, and it only becomes overwhelming if you dive into it, and then someone like myself or someone who's been in business for a while says, no, you got to do this, 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 and this. Yeah, of course. And I've done that to people. I call it puking knowledge. I know so much that if I start talking about this stuff, I don't know how to shut it off. And people go, oh my God, I quit already, and I don't want to discourage you from starting a business. So that's why we take baby steps here. And huge companies have done that. For, talking about Google. Google started off as a company, got huge, right? Started acquiring other companies, and then somebody who knows business and asset protection it was smart enough to tell the owners of the company, or maybe one of the owners figured it out, that you can't be doing business like this any longer. You've changed. You started off as a search engine, and now you're this big company acquiring other companies. And now you're doing research and you're doing this and that. Oh my gosh. October 12th, 2015, Alphabet was born on that day. They created a company called Alphabet because they realized what they were doing and how they were putting themselves at risk that they didn't need to. And we get into that later on. But I want you to know that, you know, by the 4th level training, you're going to be as smart as the attorneys with Google and Alphabet. Maybe not as well. You'll have the knowledge. That's what counts. But let's start off, and I hope you enjoyed the basics. Some of those advanced things is 4th level, so it's in a training. I believe I'm going to call it the money machine. It takes it to an extreme next level. All right, so I want to thank you, and once again, that's all we're going to cover. I hope the little tidbits didn't confuse you. I hope they got you to start thinking. Hopefully you've watched this training once, and then second time you wrote down all the notes, questions, things that hopefully we'll cover in the deep dive. And if we don't, email them to us. There's our email address if we don't cover them in the deep dive. All right? Thank you so much.